I was asked to put a title, so I did go for something. I went for a same but different. And the reason I went with that is a lot of the time when we do data work, the final product looks in a way similar to the way it looked when people did it in the traditional way or the old way, without understanding what went in the process in order to get to that point. So, but there is fundamental differences, which I will talk to today. Yeah, so I think the key takeaways for today is just, I mean, ultimately, it is possible to do more with less, invest in people, not technology, work in the open, automate, and provision of programmatic interfaces. So those, I'm gonna say a lot, but I think if those things stick, then I think it would be a positive. Also, just to say, I mean, I've got a data science unit in the city of Cape Town, and when we started a couple of years ago already, we had this great ambitions of doing very advanced analytics, changing the world. But I think we soon realized that without the basics in place, it's not going to be possible. So today I'll share a little bit about that and what needed to be in place, and basically sort of talk about what we've got in place and then what enables us to do our work and build and leverage that work and do advanced analytics.
Sorry to disturb you, Delyno. We've actually got your presenter mode on for the presentation. So
okay, let me,
so that we don't see the slides.
See my notes. No, I don't have any quick notes. So. Is that better?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to use an example. I think something that we're all familiar with is service delivery. So, I mean, you've got a problem with your lights in the street. Maybe there's a pipe that's broken. You don't have water. So then you log a call. So this is trying to illustrate that. But I think if I ask my data engineers, I think they would gnash their teeth in the simplicity of what I'm trying to illustrate here. But I think I'm just trying to get a concept across. So if you look at there, so we're starting here at the staff level. So basically, somebody's been asked to go and investigate and get an understanding or insight about service delivery. There's some leader who wants to know about what's happening on the ground. This staff member would then, there's various options that they can do. They can then go to a transactional system. They can look at that. They can try and extract data, log in, get a dump of data, use that. Sometimes all the data is not necessarily available. So then they reach out to people. So most of the time, the data custodian, or in most instances, it's IT. They have discussions. Then they either get emailed some sort of static data, or that data gets put somewhere. So they go and fetch that data. And sometimes the data is on somebody's laptop in the organization, a staff member, and they need to email it. So that individual then gets the data. They then go into a tool. Most of the time it's Excel. They do transformations. They delete columns. They delete white spaces, commas, change a string to a number to a string, change the date format. So they do a lot of changes to the data. They transform it. Then they normally store it on their laptop. What they've done, you can call it an analytical data set. Also, there's certain instances where another staff member who's also working on something similar around service delivery would also want that data. So they would ask the data. This individual who transformed it will then email it to them, and basically they will also get it. And then there's an arrow missing there, but ultimately then somebody does analysis, normally again some Excel tool, and then they deploy it, and deploy or publish it, meaning somebody needs to write a document, a report, a strategy, a framework, etc. And then hopefully at the end of the day there will be action. It will go into some decision or operational actions that takes place where the data gets used. So that's sort of at a very simplistic level how things happen, or how it happened when we started. And one can probably say to some extent still. But what are the challenges if you follow these processes? So number one, now this thing is over my slides. Okay, but number one is basically, it's very much labor intensive for that individual. When they have to go and gather all this data, it's not easy, it's not straightforward. That individual also potentially can get sick, they can go on leave, they can resign. So then that sort of falls apart, the process. So then you get a new person in there, there's a learning curve for them. Before they are up to speed, what they need to do. Yeah, no, also it is quite a mundane task to sort of do this every X number of days or weeks or months, just to get the same data from multiple people, email, call. Yeah, it's not void of any mental stresses that goes with it. Then if you, the other challenge when you transform the data is when the transformation happens, that's not visible or transparent. So if you delete a column or you change, you delete a character, for example, that's only you would know. And sometimes when you go back, you don't even remember what you've done. So there's no transparency. That data transformation is unique to the individual. You can't, like I say, sometimes when you go back, you can't reproduce what you've done. Then you put it on your laptop. And then there's different versions of this data set. Also, multiple people work with with a similar data set. They transform it, they also store it. So ultimately, across the organization, there's if you take service delivery, there's potentially multiple of these data sets in different transformed versions of service delivery. Then, in terms of the analytic challenges, so when you do analysis, it's difficult to reproduce it. So you don't always, if somebody else comes in and look at what you've done, they won't be able to get to the same answer most of the time, because they don't know what data you use, they don't know what transformations you applied, they don't know what calculations you applied. So ultimately, there's no analytical governance around it as well. So you produce a result, nobody reviewed it or scrutinized the analytical diligence of the work that was done. Also, you run into size limits sometimes. Maybe the tool you're using can't handle the data. And also, most of the time, these sort of analysis is once-off. You can't reproduce those things. If you go to 5, when you deploy it, so these deployments is normally in a PDF or some sort of a slideshow. So it's ideally what you want is machine readable data. So you want to be able to access that data and use it for other purposes. So putting it into documents that's not machine readable, it's sort of you can't leverage that data. And then obviously you need to repeat this exercise every X number of days or weeks. And then when it comes to the operational side of things, it's not, ideally you want to understand and monitor the impact of these analysis that you did, the decisions, the actions, but because the data is not readily available, it's going to be difficult for you to repeat that exercise. So it's very manual, and ultimately, which most organizations work in this way, it's not scalable as well. Then there's more complexity. So it's the same process, all that's added now the individual thinks, okay, I'm not the right person for that work, so let me write a tender. So they write a tender, they get a service provider, or they go via a grant sort of process. They do a grant application, they get some people in. Or alternatively, there's academics who wants to get in, who they know, and they get involved in this process as well. Ultimately, it goes through the same thing. They do work. The service provider, the grant funder, etc., academics, they store it on they do transformations on their tools. They store it on their laptops, on their servers, and ultimately they build products. Most of the time, when there is a decision-making tool that gets delivered, it's a proprietary tool. So as an example, let's say it's Power BI that the service provider built the tool in. The city doesn't necessarily have a license for Power BI, so now you have to go out and tender again to the open market. You might not get Power BI, you might get ClickView or Tableau or something else. Yeah, so there's challenges around that. In terms of the service provider, I mean, yeah, normally it takes quite a long time to get a service provider on board, 12 to 24 months before they even are appointed. Then they still have to get their heads around what they need to do, understand the data. So there's another few months goes by. The data is not readily available. They have to get their hands on the data. And then in terms of academics, obviously they need to apply for the data. There's approval process that takes time. Again, the data is not readily available on the right format or the granularity that they require. And then again, the transformations happen. It's not transparent. It's done on tools that's not where there's no visibility of what was done. Again, you can't reproduce that analysis. And yeah, there's no data analytics governance. And then when it comes to the publishing, again, it's not machine readable. What I was saying is there's a proprietary software that was used, so the city doesn't necessarily have that. It's difficult to sustain the product. Normally what happens is if we get provided a product by a service provider, not long after that, you need to employ a couple of more people to get this thing sustained in the organization. That comes with cost, learning curve, etc. Those people move on. So ultimately, there is a tendency to throw hands at the problem instead of working smarter. And service providers leave, so that all the knowledge that they're going through this process goes with them. That's not well documented most of the time now. So yeah, so how to address the challenges. So these are sort of traditional ways. You just continue as is. Each business unit just do what they think is best. But ultimately, it's not reproducible, sustainable. There's no data governance. There's no analytical governance. Or sometimes people try and procure their way out of a problem. So at a citywide level, at a department, directorate level, people think if only we can procure a data warehouse or a lake or some sort of business intelligence tool or artificial intelligence, then all our problems will go away. So this comes at great cost. The failure is high. I mean, if you buy these things and you realize actually that's not what we needed, it's too late. There's a time delay before any work can start. Normally, it's something that I've heard a lot that sort of was strange to me, but every time you ask for something to be done, it was the service provider feedback was, but that's not part of the roadmap. So we can't do that. That's only 2 years down the line because that's what our roadmap says. And also, ultimately, a tender will terminate. So after X number of years, that service provider will move on. The software that they applied, there potentially will be a new service provider, a new software, a new way of working. So it's a big disruption and change management that goes with this whole process. And again, the service provider leaves and all that knowledge goes with them. What I wanted to show this, so just to illustrate, I mean, this is how we operate, but I think it sort of builds on the previous slides where in government, there is a tendency to follow this waterfall approach. So we need to procure things. So let's write our specs. We get a bunch of people in a room. We spend time on the specifications. We think we need a car. We've got 3 wheels. At some stage, somebody comes and they build the car. But actually, we needed a roof, or we needed it to be electrical, etc. So there's all these things that you only realize after the fact. And basically, there's a lot that doesn't happen, and then all of a sudden things happen. So that's the risk is high. It's expensive, so failure comes at a great expense. If you follow the agile route and you say, sure enough, you want a vehicle, but let's just give you a bicycle. So go and ride this bicycle, come back after 2 weeks, let me know what you think. But as soon as possible, get something in that stakeholder's hands so that they can test it. They come back, they say, no, they want another wheel or they want an engine, etc. So it sort of iterates and builds on top, but from day one, almost, there's a product that gets developed and iterated and improved until you get to a final product. So your failure comes at an early stage. It's cheap. The risk is low. So that is if you go the capacity-led route. So the alternative to the way that I've presented how it normally works is the way that we decided with the data science unit in the city of Cape Town is we're going to invest in people. I mean, when we started the unit, we had an option. We can either wait 2 years and then get products that we can use, or we can start using products from day one. But we needed the right people in order to enable that. So very simplistically, we then went with this sort of approach where we said all data must be available via some integration, programmatic interface, and API, where even data sets from third parties must be available that way. When you transform, it must be transparent. There must be some collaboration platform that you document this. It must be stored in accessible and transparent storage system, obviously with all the given permissions, access controls, and all those sort of things. We've also got this query engine where ideally trying to leave the data at source and then applying a query engine that sort of does a transformation and the load, extract, transformation, load, etc., all in once, and then it's accessible to the stakeholder via an API. So there's no human involved. It's all automated, and depending on the stakeholder or the persona, they will then they all will get it via an API. They can use it for whichever purpose they need it. But ultimately, when they do analysis, it needs to be, again, in some sort of a version control or collaboration platform where that analytical work is visible. And that needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be rubber stamped and said, this is, this went through the necessary due diligence, the statistical, there was statistical rigor applied here, and the data that was used was correct, etc. And then you build your models and you deploy. So the opportunities here is, ideally you leave the data at source, you don't take it out of there and put it in other places. There will be instances where it's required, but that should be the minimum. When your data is in these data stores, so now I'm talking to number 4, it is searchable and accessible. So like I say, given all the permissions, people can then access that data via an API. The same data, in this case now service delivery, so can be used for multiple purposes. So, I mean, when we started, we did a management view, then people said they want an operational view, then people wanted more something unique. But we also could do, and all of this is automated. So provide a social media view. Also, that data is available to third parties. You can do things with HR, etc. So it doesn't take a lot to leverage that data for other purposes. This I just wanted to talk to. So even in the city, getting this integration, being able to do this integration, work with data in the open, that is easily transferable into a national level. So I think challenges that we had during crises and or even, I mean, on a daily basis is just getting data to access to programmatic access to data like Home Affairs, SARS, etc. So all the information we need in order to plan better for our citizens and our residents in order to make their lives easier. I think that's it.